A very warm welcome to you from Equa Marketing. This presentation is brought to you by Equa.com, a leader in digital marketing. Hello everyone, and welcome to an amazing episode of the Growing Plastic Surgeon podcast show.
I'm super excited today because I'm talking to a doctor who happens to be, more of an entrepreneur than I am, and his name is Dr. Ravi. I want him to pronounce his last name. I don't want to,
Komatireddy. I know. I should drop the first part, just use ready. But my parents insist that we distinguish ourselves with the Komatireddy part. Yeah.
Yeah, Ravi Komatireddy. That's easy. So once you say it, I get it. But
it's genetic.
Yeah, Dr. Ravi, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know I mentioned that you are a doctor and an entrepreneur. So tell us your story. I mean, talking to you and chit-chatting with you, a couple of things that really jumped out at me is that, like most doctors, you love to learn. You're very curious, but you learned all kinds of things and you got into all kinds of things. So I want to kind of trace back to the time you were in, school, medical school, and what happened after that. Just tell us what happened and tell us a little bit more so people get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. So, if I think back to that movie, first of all, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It's cool to be able to share this kind of stuff. It's very rare to have an opportunity to share this kind of information with a large swath of practicing physicians. So thank you. But it's funny, if you look back at that movie in the 90s, I remember this movie. It was called Gross Anatomy. I don't know if you've ever seen it or remember it. And it's the first part of that movie is this caricature of this interview with this guy trying to get into med school, and it's that basic question. It's like, so why do you want to come to med school? And it's like, to help people, right? And that's the joke, right? But to me, if I had to answer that question, I think my answer to that question would give you a lot more insight into kind of how my brain works. It was, medical school and being a physician is a very unique thing because you can't be every job that you think is cool in the world, right? You just live one life. You just don't have the time. But there's very few professions where you get to intersect with so many different people from different walks of life. Right. And that's a very appealing thing to me. And I think that directly appeals to a really strong feeling of curiosity. I mean, I think that's probably maybe my only strength, curiosity. Right. I really love a multidisciplinary approach to living life. Right. It's like, Benjamin Franklin, those kind of guys who are these statesmen who were like everything. Right. They were like authors, entrepreneurs, scientists, politicians, or I love that idea, right? That if you're an educated person, you should be able to speak intelligently about a wider array of things. And I think that kind of attitude toward learning is where innovative stuff comes from, right? Because you need to cross-link ideas, and you would never have an opportunity to do that unless you kind of have a dibble-dabble. Now, that's interesting because in medicine, it's kind of directly at odds with the pragmatic part of medicine, right? Because, in medical school and medical training, we have to become experts at a narrower set of things to be successful because medicine is a very pragmatic type of field. So this is the kind of thing that was very paradoxically appealing to me. At the same time, I always fought against. So in medical school, I went to medical school in 2001, University of Missouri, and I always made it an effort to branch out to the other schools at the same time while in medical school to see how I could link up ideas and just to have conversations. That was just really important to me. In med school, I took a year off to do some work in climate modeling and astrobiology and other things just for personal edification, just to fulfill my curiosity because it was, I didn't think I was going to have time later to do those things. And then I went to internship at Dartmouth-Hitchcock in New Hampshire. So I moved from Missouri to New Hampshire, packed everything in the car, went there. Had a great time the first year, and then I finished my residency in internal medicine at University of California, San Diego, here in California. So, it's funny. I left residency and took an attending position at Scripps here in town, and that's kind of where I really started branching out, into other things. And like most of this stuff, when you look back, psychologists call this retrospective bias, right? You look back at these events in your life, and you're trying to weave a thread through all these things. And they don't necessarily connect. And when you look back at it, you go, I didn't plan all this to happen. It just kind of happened. I was able to take the opportunity, but it was a lot of luck. I happened to come across several opportunities that I said yes to. One was meeting people where we eventually founded a company called Lumiata in the Bay Area, which was a venture-funded company based on big data and machine learning for healthcare. So we built one of the biggest graph databases of medical knowledge on the planet. Some of the data was used by Google's Knowledge Graph as well to provide answers to people who are searching for symptoms and things like that. It's probably where people would be familiar with it. But it was, that was we were pre-funding. We knew not much about startups or what we were doing, and we just knew that there was a problem to be solved with being smarter doctors. Like, how can we use software to become smarter doctors and practice better? And this was a really irritating thing to me in everyday practice, which I'm sure I think a lot of people who are in practice now can relate to, right? It's like, why aren't we doing this better? Why aren't the EHRs helping us better? Why don't we have better tools? And so I just happened to be able to meet people who are software engineers and who had other experiences, and we built a team to do that. At the same time, this is around 2009 or so, wearables and digital devices and this whole field of digital health was still kind of coming of age, right? It's still evolving now even, but no one was sure where it was going to go. And interestingly enough, another very wise, forward-looking physician, Eric Topol, who's a cardiologist here at Scripps in San Diego, had applied and gotten a large NIH grant. And in that grant, he made it an effort to open a position to train fellows as research scholars in this area of digital health. And if you ask, well, what was the definition of that fellowship? We have no idea, right? It was like we were making it up as we go along, right? It's like, just do something in digital health and be innovative. And so I was the first digital health scholar at Scripps. So I was still living in San Diego. I was chief medical officer of a company that would eventually be Lumiata remotely. The other part of the team was in the Bay Area. Still practicing a little bit. And then at Scripps, as a research fellow, I was doing research with digital health companies. So got to see a great swath of different digital health devices being brought to market, and for the first time had a real exposure, right, to engineers and computer scientists and data analysts and all these other walks of life that have to exist to make innovations like a Fitbit happen, right? It's a very complicated thing to bring to market, and so it was a period of drinking from the fire hose, in some sense. At the same time, my main research project at Scripps got spun out as well into a funded company called Reflection Health. We used a gaming camera that sold with the Xbox. We hacked it so people could do physical therapy in the home, trying to really switch that whole model of physical therapy. Instead of having people come to the clinic, we could just do it at home. But in 2014. I was chief medical officer of two funded companies, bringing products to market, traveling back and forth between the Bay Area and San Diego, and still kind of doing adjunct research work at Scripps Translational Science Institute. So it's a very, very, very busy year. And if you ask me, well, how did you know those opportunities existed, or how did you know that was okay to do? I didn't. To be completely honest with you, I knew that what I knew was I was curious about where this was going to go, and what I also knew was I could impact patients in the hospital every day, and that's a very important way to impact patients. And there's 1 million doctors who do that every day and just see patients every single day, and that's great. But I felt like there's a different way to contribute. I felt like if we could invent things or create things to help patients on a larger or different scale, that I was capable of that, and I think all the drive of curiosity that I had taken time to take part in before in my education kind of came to fruition, right? Like, you never know when the algorithms used for climate modeling actually are very similar to the ones used for data analysis when you're looking at motion data or something. It's like these connections that you never thought you would make, right? All of a sudden are actually useful now. So that's kind of a rough idea of how everything kind of came to be. Is that too much? That sounds crazy when I think about it now.
No, I think it's perfect. I want to kind of zoom into a few things, right? One is most doctors are very curious. Pretty much I've seen them in action, and they go to conferences, and they're always learning and studying, and always like driven, right? They want to learn the next thing. And they're very smart. Otherwise, they wouldn't have got into medical school. They wouldn't have, ended up, becoming a doctor. But then somewhere along the line, they become very regimented and very, they're given this box to stay inside. This is the way the world works, and this is how insurance works, and etc., etc., and they kind of stay there, and then they've done surveys, and many of them are not necessarily happy staying there, but they do stay there. So, but you did not stay there. You took a different path, and
what's different, right? Yeah, absolutely. No, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious, like now, hindsight is 2020. I'm sure you have a lot of friends who took the traditional path, the path you did not take. What gave you the courage to kind of, say yes to those, like you mentioned, life is like a box of chocolates, to say yes to that, new chocolate you saw, like what gave you the courage to kind of keep saying yes to those things?
It's interesting you said that, because part of it's just the boldness of being a very curious person, right? So I just, I wanted to see what AI was all about. I mean, how is this going to impact medicine? What does it mean? Where was the state of technology? How are we going to interface with computers and systems? I mean, 10 years down the road, I mean, the AI in medicine's evolved so much now that people are talking about, do we even have jobs anymore in 10 years? But, back then, I mean, it was still unclear on what direction these things were going to take, right? And so I was so curious about that, and I felt like that was a very exciting thing to me, just in terms of evoking an emotional passion. Now, what you're saying is so interesting, because what you said was, they kind of, doctors feel like they're being put in a box, and I think I agree with exactly how you said that, because I agree. It's like, doctors are so interesting, Naren, because the way we're taught is so unique compared to any other vocation or professional. And when I say that, I mean, although we're expected to have deep knowledge in narrow aspects of practice, when we're taught in medical school, one thing I noticed was that we are expected to learn and understand things on several different layers of scope, right? I mean, you have to understand microbiology and biochemistry and physics and all that, the basic sciences, fundamental principles. But, at the end of 4 years, you could integrate that information with how to see a patient and diagnose and do data analysis, right, and treatment and pharmacology. And it's like very rare to have so many levels of understanding and the ability to learn. I think one thing medical school does really well that we don't really talk about that much is it sets up physicians to be able to integrate information from lots of different areas like that and learn. We learn to learn. Right? And we're always learning. Like you said, we're curious. Now, those two skills are perfect for so many other areas that doctors could enter into, right? And I think like innovation, entrepreneurship, legal profession, politics, there's so many areas where we need healthcare voices, right? And I think the reason, like you were getting at, I'm answering your question now, I guess, about why why doctors maybe don't do that is because, when you go through all that in training and clinical residency, one of the reasons is there's not many people who model it for you. We don't talk about it a lot in medical school, which I think is a real mistake. And there are some schools who are doing this, who make it like an ancillary class, right? Here's the things you can do outside of medicine. We'll have some people come in and speak to you who are chief medical officers or clinical informaticists or something. But there's just not that much exposure. So a lot of people, medical students, don't even know that these positions are available, or that doctors could do this, or that they should do it, or what the benefits or the negatives are, right? So there's not that exposure, that there's no one they can model. And secondly, I think there's been a traditional thought of, well, that's kind of beneath us. We don't want to teach business stuff in medical school or something, which I think is a very bad thing. I think that's going to set people up for failure. And if you look at any other school, like business school, that's kind of all they do, is set you up to succeed at the end of that 2-year period, right? So in any company or area you want to go into. So it's funny. I think there's some problems with how we teach, and I think that's changing a little bit. But I think with this traditional model of medical school, you come out of it and then you think you become a very risk-averse person. You have this knowledge. You probably have student debt. You've spent a lot of time getting to this point, and you're looking for these opportunities. They're going to get you income and a stable position. And I think it's funny. Doctors kind of settle into this very risk-averse kind of track. You know what I mean? And I think I'm more reckless in general, so that's probably a personality flaw. But that recklessness sometimes translates and it can be controlled and tamed. And I think I take a little more risks because, entrepreneurship and the things that I do that, don't necessarily involve practicing every day are definitely much more risky, right, than a traditional practice. And they're not any better than a traditional practice. And I dare say that, the physicians I've met, and there are many physicians when you do delve out of clinical practice, physicians that are doing different roles, right? Chief medical officers, CEOs, whatever. They're all doing these other things. And I'm not saying that what we're doing is better than seeing patients. Seeing patients is still a very important thing. Who knows which one's more important or which one actually makes more impact? It's too hard to tell that. I think, though, if we had to leave a principle with your listeners, it would be that, first of all, it's okay to be curious and to branch out. Like I said, our training sets us up to succeed in so many other fields. So it's okay to branch out and explore those things. It doesn't make you less of a physician, and you don't have to quit a practice and go to law school or go do a startup. And I don't think that's what anyone is advocating if it's not the right thing. But I think that there are several layers in between those extremes, right?
Right. You hit an amazing point, and I think that's something I want to just kind of talk a little bit more about, which is, I'm an entrepreneur. I did it the hard way. I got fired 4 times in a row, and then I had to do something on my own, and I figured it out over a overnight success over since 2002, so 15 years in the making, right? So and you're right. The secret of great entrepreneurs is they can combine things. Like, for example, we have a product called drandme.tv, and 15 years ago, I wouldn't have even come up with it because I didn't know how to combine things. So we combined the idea of creating a show for a doctor where they're interviewed, and then taking that big show, breaking it into small pieces, small videos, great for Instagram, great for Facebook, great for YouTube, great for viral marketing, and then doing it for the doctor. So doctors are busy, so they just show up for a podcast like you and I are doing, and then pretty much that 45 minutes of their time turns into this amazing marketing tool that gets them in front of thousands of people who know them, like them, and trust them. So it's kind of putting those pieces together is what entrepreneurship is. It's just connecting the dots. And you're saying doctors are trained to do that in medical school, but they don't realize they have the superpower, and nobody talks about how they can use the superpower beyond just, it's not like taking care of patients is a bad thing, but that's not the only thing. You can make a difference in multiple ways.
That's a great term. It is a superpower. I mean, it really is. And the reason I know it is because, not from my example, but, friends that I've made over the years who have also delved out to become CEOs of startups or on medical advisory boards or things like that, or different levels of other things, right? They're able to command an audience and talk intelligently and make innovative leaps that are very astounding. I mean, they're incredible, right? That you couldn't just necessarily do if you were trained only in engineering or only in computer science or things. No disrespect to those fields either, but like I said, we are trained to be able to integrate that information, and it's okay. If there was a way we could systematically change medical education somewhat to be able to say this needs to be part of the core curriculum, right? Where we start talking about and inviting people who are doing these other things. Because, here's not even from like a theoretical, this is good for society example. It's good for us. I mean, think about the EHR. Think about the angst that is the electronic health record and the perception of what that software is in this country. It's funny, I come from a family of physicians. So my uncle, who's an EP doc, if I mention the word EHR, he goes, that thing was designed to make a mockery of doctors. I mean, the bitterness, and I can understand it because it's very difficult to use. Imagine if there's a clinical voice behind that, or if a physician started an EHR and made it, designed it for the things that physicians do. I mean, it's so hard to get that kind of opinion, in a company these days. And if you could get that physician leadership, think about how you could change that software to be something that would be really helpful for you, patients, and solve business problems that the administration wants to solve. You know what I mean? I mean, this can make practical differences for how we practice in this country in the future of our jobs and the future for our patients' welfare. The other, another area is, with healthcare policy. I mean, in this country right now, obviously, this is a extremely important topic, and I just don't hear physician voices. I hear a lot of people talking about healthcare who to my knowledge, have no real direct experience or high level knowledge of it. I mean, they serve as advisors, but I think especially this administration's shown, I think we need to step out of the advisor role and take leadership roles. I think that's what's going to make a difference. And these are the same kind of leadership roles we take in the hospital, right? We run teams in the hospital. We coordinate care. We integrate information. We always learn, all those things that we do on a routine basis can be done in these other areas.
Right. I mean, the theme of my show and why I started this is I believe that every human being, including doctors, want to create a bigger future for themselves, right? And usually it comes down to time, money, purpose, and relationships. Now, you took a path that most of my listeners haven't taken or may even afraid to even think about taking. And again, like it's a degree, right? So it doesn't mean that everybody has to do exactly what you did, but they can, maybe try different things. So my question to you is, in terms of now looking back, you went to medical school in 2002,
2004, yeah.
Right. And now looking back, and you started practicing in 2008, in terms of time, money, purpose, and relationship, what kind of an impact has this journey, brought to you?
It's huge impacts. I mean, social, personal, intellectual, monetary, whatever, what have you. I mean, it's funny. If you look back and you walk back this whole chain of causality, right? I mean, I'm a space nut, right? I mean, I worship the space program. I think it's one of the greatest things humans have ever done. And to me, a lot of digital health and medical innovation actually comes from that kind of science and engineering stuff, right? Those big projects. So, I've tried to involve myself in space medicine grants and projects, and I've been fortunate to be able to do things like, test digital health devices on the zero-G plane. I think if you Google me on YouTube, you'll find me upside down doing some testing on something. But it's like that's the kind of opportunity that's like a dream come true that I never would have even thought about being able to do, right? Unless I that device I was actually testing there. I'll tell you how I got that. I didn't even know the people. I snuck into a medical conference that just happened to be happening, going on in town in San Diego. This was like when I was, younger, and I wasn't a fellow yet, so no one knew me there. And I just saw a vendor with that device. Said, "Hey, listen, I'm going to apply for a NASA grant. Do you want to be part of this?" And they said, "Yes." That's how that happened. I mean, it was literally just luck. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I didn't have a badge. You can't. That doesn't work all the time, right? I mean, you can't be that bold and reckless all the time. But I just knew that I wanted to do it. I wanted to be involved in NASA stuff, in space medicine stuff, and especially with the commercial space industry, because there's opportunities for people to go up in space. I knew people were going to be monitored. There's no health guidelines. How can we help make that whole thing I wanted to be part of?
Let me ask you this.
I just went for it.
On the purpose front, right? Now, assuming you did not take this path you took and got involved in lots of these companies and, leverage your strength as a, having that superpower to, connect the dots. If you did not take that path, from a purpose standpoint, what has happened to your life right now that perhaps may not have happened to you if you didn't take this path?
Well, I think that
I know you said you wanted to help people, right? That's why most doctors get into medicine, but here also you're helping people, but perhaps in a different way.
Yeah, it's absolutely how you want to do it. So the thing that I get off on most, like if you look at the activities I do for leisure and for work, which are basically the same for me most days, it's really I like to live on this line that's the intersection between art and science. I mean, I'm just addicted to that, and actually doctors are too. That's what medicine is. Right? Medicine is that exact thing. It's like you have to know the science of the body and physiology, but you have to know the art of diagnosing and talking to people. And that's why I think there's a lot of purpose I find and meaning in that, right? But, I also find a lot of meaning for me, in more excitement, specifically for me, in an intersection of, software, innovation, the stuff I'm working on now with AI and healthcare and taking ideas from one area of science or engineering or technology or art and putting it in another and seeing if it works, and then building teams to do that. That's really fulfilling for me. So I find I have high purpose in that. What's interesting though to note is that I think we should be cognizant of the fact that when medical students come into medical school, a good chunk of them don't come in as kind of blank slates, right? like people already have things that they like to do, that they like to have as hobbies, interests outside of science or medicine, or and sometimes I think they have to quell that to go in and put those aside to focus. But for those people who do have those outside interests coming into med school or as a physician, there are probably opportunities to combine those things, like you were talking about. Video, for example. I mean, imagine if someone, a doctor starting a YouTube channel where they're actually talking, or a TV show is talking about, healthcare in some way. I'm not talking about Dr. Oz and that kind of stuff, but like real stuff, like really helping people. And it's like, if you had an interest in filmmaking, for example, you could understand how you could combine those topics and get a kick out of both your passions. So I think that purpose, it has to be, is somewhat defined by what you come in with and what you're already interested in, because people are already interested in tons of stuff by the time they get to be a physician.
Right.
So it's like really like, how can we be creative in combining that stuff? I don't know of a better time in the history of humans, right, where you have we have opportunities to do like filmmaking in the home, or like startups with a small group of people that are just being bootstrapped, or right. I mean, this is the time.
Right. I totally agree. I think we have never lived in a time that's better than the current time in terms of opportunities.
I don't want to paint a rosy picture either. But there are painful moments, and there are many, many painful moments here. And like I said, it's high risk.
Right.
I've lost lots of stuff. I've lost lots of time. I feel like the grass is always greener, and sometimes I see colleagues just kind of like, getting stuff done, and in traditional medical practice, I'm like, damn it, I feel like I'm going nowhere. But if you talk to most entrepreneurs, that's kind of status entrepreneur, right? It's like it's like status anxiety. It's just that's where entrepreneurs live. It's really doctors that live in this weird bubble where they don't experience the rest of how the world works like that. Let me give you an example. When I first became a fellow, I was a research fellow, so it was more, and I was working in hand with another nonprofit institution. I was 26 or something. I didn't know what a calendar invite was, and they're like, oh, I'll just put this on your calendar. And they're like, I don't like, what's a calendar invite? They're like, how do you not know what a calendar invite was? I'm like, well, we never use that in medical practice. It's just something we don't do.
Right.
Like most doctors were like sitting at a desk in a cubicle. It's just something we just don't do or experience or have never done before. And so it's like we're actually the ones I think are more insulated. Even if you didn't want to branch out and make a career out of doing other things, I think there's probably significant value in just experiencing how the rest of the world works to some extent. Right.
No, that's amazing. Now, on the relationships front, one thing that you said that really resonated with me is that you're still doing what you're passionate about, but you're kind of tweaking it. You're kind of going, like you said, you loved space, right? So, of course, now you're doing, medicine with space. That's fun, right? So you're kind of personalizing it, which gives you more meaning. Now, on the relationship front, I guess you talked about one of the common things about doctors is they're very curious. They're always learning. They love to learn. So on the relationship front, is that also kind of different when you take this path? I mean, do you feel you have richer relationship, more meaningful relationships?
I think I have relationships with people that I never would have met otherwise, who have really broadened my understanding of the world, the universe, kind of in a larger way, right? I mean, not just in a practical, how can I improve my business in my career kind of way, but more develop me as a person. I mean, we all go through that kind of maturation.
Right.
We get molded, as balls of clay in that way. I think I've been, instead of being drawn into a long serpent-like thing in a mold, I've been flattened out. I've been more spread out. I've been able to touch and understand and experience so many other fields of science, which is just a passion for me, and art as well. So I never would have come into contact with people like that, just because you end up being probably, the equivalent of like the 5 people you hang out with, and you really have to make an effort to surround yourself with people who are always going to push you in terms of your knowledge and what you're comfortable with. And I think in that way, I've had much richer relationships. Now, that help me mature as a more well-rounded person. Now, do those obviously give you opportunities to advance projects that you want to move forward? Absolutely, right? That's for sure as well.
Right, and I love what you said about surrounding yourself with people who are going to push you. And I think most of us, the number one thing we lack or could have more of is courage, right? Because, I mean, look at Mark Zuckerberg. He's 32 years old and he's thinking of getting rid of disease in the world. I mean, most people will say the guy is crazy. You know what I mean? But when he was 17, he had courage to build a music app that Microsoft wanted to pay him $1 million for. So it didn't happen overnight. Like his courage kept growing and growing. So what you're saying is some of the people you met and you surround yourself has tons of courage, and that kind of makes you have more courage.
Well, and I think that's true. But one thing I would add, though, as I've been, I just started a new company called Motive Labs based on using AI for healthcare, and we're recruiting people and building and prototyping right now, going for a funding run pretty soon. But while doing that, I've been practicing a lot more than last year, just basic good old clinical hospitalist medicine. And I have to say, the docs that are, to the listeners you have that are working those 12-hour days and 12-hour shifts, seeing patient after patient, doing the best they can to fight. I mean, I would say that they also have a lot of courage. I mean, I have massive respect. I think more respect now coming back to clinical medicine to those doctors who are just getting it done every day. And I think that also takes a lot of courage to do that.
Right. So now that coming back, you said you have more respect for doctors, who are doing it day in and day out, and you said that takes a lot of courage. Is it because of the system is kind of so not awesome in terms of, putting the interest of the doc first and putting the interest of the patients first? Is that why you feel like just to stay in there, you need a ton of courage?
It's hard work. I mean, make no mistake. I mean, like a lot of people do hard work, but this is hard work in a different way. And the stakes are high. You have hard intellectual work. You have hard manual work. It's hard work. And on top of that, you have a lot of demands put on you. It's like failing in any of those different areas have high stakes, right? Not being able to keep up with the science or the latest techniques or therapies or whatever. There's stakes. There are consequences of that. Not, navigating the political situation that is, the modern healthcare center or the clinic or practice or running the business is hard. It's just hard. It's a really hard thing. And I don't want to. I'm not saying we should complain. I mean, we're still some of the best paid professionals as a group in the nation. It's just I think these have been well described as well in several other articles and people talking about them. If you look at Patty Barrett's podcast that I was on, he's a cardiologist at the Dr. Paradox. He does a great job of getting people to talk about physician burnout, and those reasons for burnout are getting better and better described now. I think those are really wearing on people, right? There's a lot of demands put on doctors where they feel like they don't have the autonomy they once did. When you lose control over the things that you're made to do, that's different, right? I mean, people work really hard in a lot of fields, and doctors don't complain about the work. I don't think it's more that autonomy and the resultant potential loss of purpose and meaning that comes along with it, right? And that's hard. That's
right.
Hard.
Right. No, that's absolutely. One of the people I interviewed is somebody who used to be an internal medicine doc, and he was seeing like a mill, working for the insurance, so many people, and he couldn't give the attention he wanted to. So he went on his own and he started this boutique practice. He and an assistant, and they have 600 patients, and and they can text him, they can talk to him, and and it's not concierge medicine. It's almost like Netflix in the sense they pay a subscription fee, so to speak, and they have him pretty much for the whole year, and actually they end up saving money, so it's actually cheaper than insurance in some cases, and it's much better for the patient. It's much better for the doctor. And the other funny thing is they innovate. Like, for example, he figured out a way to do that diabetes test. Is it called AC1? What is that?
A1C.
A1C, for like $10 or something, and he because he's on his own, right? So he thinks, he looks around, he asks questions. But he's so much happier because he's doing the kind of work he wanted to do, that personalized service with a few patients, and everybody wins.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of something that's kind of that represents a layer within these extremes, right? Of leaving complete clinical medicine to practicing as part of a large practice at a as a hospital employee, practicing medicine the way you want. And I can understand there are people in situations where they just can't literally afford to do that, right? I mean, they have responsibilities, children, spouses, financial, whatever, where they just have a lot of difficulty seeing a way out of that. And I can understand that. And I think I don't want to trivialize that. But, if you open your eyes and you really try to start networking out in the world, I think there are opportunities to really make a difference in other ways. I mean, one of the simplest ways would be, there's companies all the time who are innovating cool things are looking for physicians to be part of their advisory boards, right? To help them refine the right medical questions. Are they solving the right problems? How do we make this work? That's a very important role that I think people get compensated for and do. It's just something you never get taught, or it's not even talked about in medical school.
Right. I would love to have you back, but any final thoughts before we wrap up, Doctor?
I think if I had one thing that I think I've learned that is the most important thing that I tell people. Because people ask me all the time, how did you get, how, if you're not an engineer or someone who can code or do all these things, how are you able to do all these other things? I mean, and I would say, I can build I can tell the story and build the right team around me, or join the right team to where we're, on a purpose to do something cool, right? But I think the most important thing about that is, as I tell the docs, I'm like, it's okay to branch out. You're not escaping medicine. You're not being less of a physician. You'll have this, you won't lose any respect from your peers. That's not what this is about. This is about, intersecting with the world in the way that makes you happy, that's able to combine your interests and your medical training, right? And there's many paths for that. And that's the first step, is just to know that that's okay. And there are people that you can model and reach out to that will help you along that path. But it is a more risky one. It's a little more hazy to see farther ahead on that path. But they do exist. Right.
And I think, like anything else, that taking that first step is what the scary part. But once you take that tiny step, you will be more comfortable taking the next step, right? Like you said, maybe become an advisor to a company and, take those tiny steps.
Right. Absolutely.
And I guess I love what you said when we were chit-chatting. Before I wrap up, I want to share that story where you said you literally flew down to one of your buddies and you went to this LinkedIn party, right? So I would love for you to tell that story. You didn't get paid for showing up, but you did.
Oh, no. This is the great thing about, San Francisco Bay Area. That's kind of what makes people flock there, is you get these great intersections of people, right? And so they're able to, there's lots of ways to intersect with cool people there. We had a mutual friend, and I met, the person who co-founded Lumiata, who was the CEO of Lumiata. That's where I first met him. I mean, he hired me there and said, listen, I was with a friend of mine, and we were in the Bay Area, and it was like LinkedIn's like, I don't know, some birthday party. It was like their third or fourth birthday party on their campus. There's different speakers that were invited. I don't know how we got in there. And I was complaining to my friend. I was like, and I was just a new attending in hospice medicine. I was like saying, there's so many ways we could make us more efficient if we had the right software. And he goes, I got a friend who's working on that. He's over there on the other side of the room. And he literally introduced us. And me and Ash, hit it off really quickly. And we thought there was a lot of alignment in the way we were thinking about things. And I wanted to join his effort to make software that did that. So that's how that happened. I mean, it's just, there's no way to predict that was going to happen. By going there, I thought I was just going to a party in the Bay Area with a friend.
Right. That one small party changed your life in some ways, right? That's amazing.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I really appreciate having you today. And I know our listeners would get a lot of inspiration and ideas from you. So I would love to have you back. And if people want to learn more about you, or just to learn more about any of your projects, any websites maybe they could check out?
Motive Labs, we're going to have a Motive Labs website up pretty soon, but check out my link. They can find me on LinkedIn, or my Twitter is at R Komatireddy as well, and I can leave those links with you. And if there's anyone who's really interested and wants to get hold of me, I'm happy to give out my email address so they can contact me if they'd like.
Perfect. Yeah, if you can give us those links and the contact information, we will add it to the show notes, and people can get a hold of you and get some ideas from you if needed, or at least follow you and see what you're doing. So
yeah, I'd love to answer questions and hope I can open someone's eyes, or at least elicit an opinion from some of the listeners. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. It's very rare, like I said, to get to be able to talk about this area of practicing medicine. So I'm glad that you provide the opportunity for us to do that.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to a wonderful episode of the Growing Plastic Surgeon podcast show.